Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Seeing Your People, How to Better Care for Your Employees. Please note that we'll be holding a live question and answer session at the end of the presentation. You'll notice just to the right of the slides, we have a series of tabs there. You'll see a chat in the first tab there, and that will be able to allow you to let us know if you have any technical issues, any other technical related questions, and at any points during the presentation where there's interaction with our speaker today, you can use the chat feature. And just to the right of the chat tab, we have the Q&A tab, which is where you can submit questions for our Q&A session that will be held at the end of the presentation. And also I'll note at the end of the tabs there, we have a handout tab. We do have some PDFs that you will be able to click on and download at any time during the presentation. And so with that out of the way, let's get started. I'm Jeffrey Smith, your host for today, and I'm pleased to introduce the speaker for today's webinar, Dr. Dominik Nowak. Dr. Nowak is a practicing family physician and a faculty member in the Department of Family and Community Medicine in the University of Toronto. He trained at McMaster University, where he specialized in family medicine and served as chief resident. He also finished a Master's of Health Administration at the Institute of Health Policy, Management, and Evaluation out of the Dalai Lama School of Public Health. Dr. Nowak is also chair of the TELUS Medical Advisory Council. In this capacity, he drives collaboration across a cross-functional team of experts to mount a science-based and compassionate response to emerging health issues. He is a trusted advisor to senior leaders across TELUS and other Canadian organizations in health and safety, business continuity, emergency operations, healthcare, digital health, ventures, and corporate citizenship. And now I'll turn things over to Dr. Nowak to get things started.
Jeffrey, thank you so much. And if you think about where we are today compared to a year and a half ago and having some of these conversations, it's just amazing how far some of these social purpose and employee and team member health discussions have progressed. So I want to thank the folks here for sharing the space with me. I'm Dominik Nowak, just like Jeffrey said. I'm a family doctor, and I also happen to be the chair of the Medical Advisory Council at TELUS. And this is a team of health professionals and health experts really focused on health promotion, I'd say, for our 60,000 team members globally, role modeling good public health messaging, and doing that in a way that's based in both science and then also compassion. I'm a faculty at U of T, including in the Institute for Pandemics. And what I find helpful to share in intros is some of what led me to family medicine, because it helps share the context for the discussion, especially on addressing social needs and seeing people in a more holistic way. So my first experience, I think, or one of my core experiences with family practice was really in my grandfather's cancer journey, right? So when I was little, many years ago, my grandfather was diagnosed with cancer, and it was really his family doctor that carried him, but also our family through his medical needs, the uncertainty involved, the social needs involved with everything going on in his cancer journey. And supported us in that one. That really framed what it looked like to me, what it looked like to be a good family doctor, and to look at people in a comprehensive way, in a way where it's respectful to their social context and their broader context as well. So, without further ado, we're going to launch a discussion. I think I see this as a place where we'll think about how are your team members doing, how are our team members doing more broadly, and then also what are some creative ways, including in addressing social needs and keeping people happy, healthy, and productive, knowing how important it is for a workforce or team members to be happy, healthy, and productive, to have a healthy organization. So those are our main questions or puzzles for today, I'd say. So again, a lot of respect to the folks here on the call, because you're really leading the way in thinking through what are the challenges facing today's employees, especially in the last year and a half, especially through COVID with what's going on. And I want to start off with a poll, and a lot of you would have seen this kind of the Fauci scale. But essentially, it mirrors what we might see elsewhere as the mental health continuum. So you could see A here, Dr. Fauci is healthy, he's functioning well. B, reacting, maybe the slings and arrows, everyday things are sometimes getting to him, but mostly he's doing well. C, injured, so maybe having an impact on sleep, on workplace functioning, everything like that. D is actually diagnosable. There's severe functional impairment, you need treatment more urgently. And E, kind of not sure, so or prefer not to answer. So please go ahead and share with us today. Again, this is something called the Fauci scale in pop culture, or it actually reflects something we many of us know well as the mental health continuum. So getting a lot of responses back now, and actually, this is unsurprising. So a few people say their team members are healthy, or they're healthy, around 8%. A lot of people are reacting. So around 6 out of 10 people are saying that things are going on and they're taking it okay, but they're a little bit on edge, or kind of on that reacting lens. 1 in 4 almost are in that injured, in that C area. And then around 1 in 20 in that ill or serious distress category as well, and then a few not sure. So actually, this is reflective of what we're seeing Canada-wide and really globally, especially in the last year and a half. So where our team members are having a tough time, right? Beyond the Fauci scale, beyond that part, half of us feel exhausted. Over half of us feel stressed, and these numbers are actually self-report, so it's probably even higher than that. You'll see in the bottom there, it shows how many organizations feel that burnout is a top issue for their team members, and it's actually most of us. Right? Most of us are acknowledging how important this is. And no wonder, right? We're working harder, longer than ever before. Half of people say that their workload is actually much or somewhat more today than it was before the pandemic. Our mental health is declining. 60% of Canadians actually feel their mental health is worse. And people are generally not often, a lot of people are not seeking care, right? So half of employees have not sought medical support for mental health issues where they could have otherwise, where they might have had the opportunity to. And I think questions like this are important to think about in context. We're in this context of COVID right now, and people often think about COVID as a virus or a biological entity. But in reality, and this group especially sees this, COVID is a social and economic, a community disparity widening, chasm creating entity, or what we'd call a syndemic or a combined epidemic. So it has kind of the biological factors and then also the social, economic, political, and so forth. And you could see here this visual that emerged early in the pandemic of some of the waves of a single wave of COVID. And keep in mind that in many places in the world, we've had several of these waves that have just chopped up and up on each other and have crushed really people along the way. So this first wave of the immediate virus, and then you can see kind of the ICU impact and hospital, everything like that. And the second wave of impact on other non-COVID conditions. So they think of heart disease, but also mental health, actually, too. It makes it harder. COVID and everything going on oftentimes makes it harder for people to connect to mental health resources and everything like that in the ways they traditionally might have. This third wave as well of interrupted care. Say you were doing well with some supports beforehand, whether they were social or mental health related, but then all of a sudden some of those supports are removed with some of the wave going on, or your social circles, what you'd usually use to keep well, was removed. And then this fourth wave as well, in thinking about this shared traumatic experience really that affected us all, and affected us all actually quite differently, because even though it was a shared storm, everyone had a bit of a different boat. Some of us were in actually quite good boats, others had canoes or life rafts even, or nothing at all. So the fourth wave impact on mental health, on economic injury, on burnout, especially for folks with additional responsibilities beyond the workplace, like parenting and caregiving and so forth. So what's our opportunity here? And this is something that I think about often as a family doctor. What if I told you that most of our health, most of your health isn't related to your biology? It's It's not related to your genes. It's not related to your you know your biology as we traditionally think about it, and not even related to things that are more downstream like diet and exercise or these kind of things that we sometimes compartmentalize as the treatment for a lot of medical conditions. What if I told you most of health is actually related to social needs and something called the social determinants of health? So these are things like income, early childhood development, different abilities, education, social exclusion or connectedness, social safety nets, gender, and employment and working conditions, race and racism, discrimination in other ways as well, food security, housing, homelessness, or housing security more generally, and community belonging. Again, that sense of connectedness to one's environment. And these are called the social determinants of health. And in reality, I see this every single day in my work as a family doctor, including in people who end up having to take time off work and recover and in mental health issues and so forth. The social determinants of health actually contribute to 80%, 80% of health and well-being, much more so than the pure biology. That's what the studies show. And studies show that even a small investment in social determinants, especially as they pertain to mental health and everything like that we'll talk about today, has a huge return on investment for health systems. And then we'll talk about the organizational ones as well. So I'll share a patient story with us, an example of someone I might see in my practice to really illustrate this point as it occurs on a day-to-day basis. And this is someone who's a single parent for two children. They were schooling at home through the pandemic, which is incredibly stressful for a lot of people. They have a stressful job, but they actually happen to enjoy it. It's high pressure, but it's good work. They like their team. And through the last year and a half, they've had diabetes that they've known about, but also much worsening mental health. We were thinking about what are our options for this person together and trying to co-design some kind of a treatment plan. So we were thinking about talk therapy, medication options, maybe time off work to relieve some of that stress, that overlapping stress between home, the workplace, and everything else going on. And we actually landed on something very different after exploring what was going on in this person's life. We actually connected them to a municipally subsidized childcare. So municipally subsidized childcare in addressing a social need, and their social need for having a time for themselves and having childcare that actually allows them to participate meaningfully in their community beyond their responsibilities as a caregiver and as a team member. And they've done fabulously better since then. Obviously, we also connected this person with mental health talk therapy and everything like that. They ended up having time for talk therapy because of the child care. But this social prescription, as we might call it, was so much more impactful for the person than any medical prescription I could have written, even though we were also discussing those as options. So, and now I hear that this person actually paired up with a work friend to volunteer at a community garden near the municipally subsidized childcare centers, and their mental health is better. We still need to treat their diabetes and everything like that, of course, but it's significantly better as well from the exercise and the outdoors time that came with some of that addressing the social need. So this is a time especially to reframe how we think about people's health, and especially in this context of blurred boundaries between work stressors and home stressors. Before the pandemic, people spent around a third of their lives, an entire third of their lives at work. And now actually many people essentially live at work. So the workplace and our organizations have a huge responsibility to steward people's health in a positive way and keep people healthy. And not only because it leads to happy, healthy, productive people, and the return on investment is there, as we'll talk about, but also because it's the right thing to do. At the end of the day, it's part of our social purpose as organizations to care for the people that we work with and that contribute to our shared mission, whatever it ends up being. So to rewind a little bit, and a lot of this talk is around this concept called social prescribing. And this is a concept that emerged from really, I think, healthcare and a state of humility and learning in healthcare, including catching our own biases as health professionals and my own bias as a health professional trained in a very medical model. So thinking through this question, what would it look like if health systems saw the patient as a whole person? What would that truly look like? And including the example that I shared earlier about the person who was going through mental health concerns and had diabetes and everything like that. What would it look like if your doctor's visit actually saw you, or your hospital, or wherever your intersection point with the health system is, if they saw you as a whole person beyond just the prescriptions and the diagnoses? What would that look like in terms of your treatment? How would it get you better? How would it get you healthy sooner? Understanding that when you write a prescription, let's say a prescription for a medication, has actually a limited impact for a lot of people. For example, someone who actually can't afford healthy food and has troubles with food security, right? The prescription for a diabetes probably has much more limited impact than setting them up with an affordable food security program and going through some of the social needs process there, or in the other example, getting someone to affordable childcare and so forth. All these things have such a powerful impact when combined with what we traditionally call the medical model. But at the same time, this view has some problems, right? You could imagine if we think about this only in terms of health systems, in terms of addressing social needs, then people with social needs would wait until they get a visit to their doctor to talk about this kind of stuff. When in reality, why should we split social needs into purely medical care? Aren't we just medicalizing social needs then? Probably we actually need multiple access points, and especially access points to address social needs before they turn into health problems at the workplace, right, where people spend a third of their lives, and which is probably the most realistic place to have an intersection point here. So shifting it to the workplace, you have this. What would it look like if workplaces saw the employee as a whole person? And again, I'm coming to this from a place of humility, because I know, I understand a lot of our colleagues, especially the ones on the line here, that are so dedicated to this question and so dedicated to making a difference for people here, especially in the last year and a half. But in the pursuit of, I think, good and pursuit of better, asking this question and re-asking it of our organizations as well. What would it look like if our organizations saw the employee as a whole person? We'll take people's unique situations into consideration, and we think about that 80% of health and well-being that's related to actually social needs and not just purely medical needs. So when you think of a prescription, what do you think of? You think of maybe cholesterol medication, diabetes medication, prescription for a vaccine. We've seen that's very, very important, especially in COVID. People get protected, but also other things, actually. Social prescribing, it's kind of like a medical prescription, but addresses social needs. And this has emerged in the medical literature. And I'd love to see it more comprehensively. And I've seen it embraced by a lot of organizations, this concept of addressing social needs. So I'll share some examples from my practice. First one is a gardening program for someone whose father passed away, and they shared a deep love of their family garden when they were growing up. And this actually addressed the what was thought to be the medical need of depression, which ended up being grief, right, and loss, and found this person purpose, actually connectedness with other people and their community, a shared interest, nostalgia. Another example is a good food box, right? So these are programs that are local, where you have an entire, essentially, bucket of fruits and vegetables and healthy food from your local community for something like $10 or $13, depending on the program. This was for a busy student worker who had otherwise found healthy food unaffordable at the regular grocery store, let's say. Another example was a volunteer program at the hospital for a person who was recently single, actually retiring and looking for a new sense of purpose and to foster that sense of giving back as they were thinking about letting go of their previous job and moving on from that life. So as you can see, social prescriptions are very much like medical prescriptions in that they can be offered in some of our settings, like the medical setting or the workplace setting. It's also a prescription for nature, for connectedness, for affordable nutrition, for purpose, and a lot of these different things. And I'll share a quote from one of the coordinators for health promotion from one of the Ontario Community Health Centres, really been leading the way in social prescribing for their clients in a wide variety of contexts, by the way, not just in the purely medical context. So they said this: social prescribing is able to strengthen the sense of connectedness that our clients have with their communities. People are happier, self-motivated, taking care of themselves better, more confident, connected, and less lonely. In some cases, they've become their own advocates. It's those types of results that can be easily lost in other shorter studies, but they're game changers in people's lives and in health. I agree. It's the difference between someone wanting to live their life and just being there. And I'd argue as well, it's the difference between someone just showing up to work and actually meaningfully, purposefully contributing to the shared mission of whatever that organization happens to be. And it's not just talk. So social prescribing or workplaces and organizations, and including healthcare, addressing social needs, we know that has positive impact. So, sometimes people trivialize social prescribing and say it's kind of a prescription for a museum visit or something that's one of like that. But in reality, it's so much more than that. And this is an example from, again, the Alliance for Healthier Communities, which is the organization that represents all the community health centers in Ontario, called RX Community, where they, across 11 community health centers, provided or shared or co-designed over 3,000 social prescriptions with over 1,000 clients. And they saw improved mental health, saw a decrease in loneliness that was quite significant. They saw an increase in social and physical activities. And you think of, what does it actually mean to have a good social prescription? And especially as we think about incorporating, addressing social needs to influence and make better the health of our team members. How do you do it in a way that's really thoughtful and mindful of the challenges of a workplace? So I'll start here. And these are the core values I'd share as a key to social prescribing. So one, it's based on the relationship a person has with whoever is making the connection. And that could be a relationship with a person's peer, with their team leader, or with the organization as a whole, and that they're viewed positively and they're more likely to buy in and to that co-designed social prescription. Strengths-based as well. That's the second value I'd share. A lot of the time in medicine and in programs that are very much addressed on the individual and looking at time off work and disability and everything like that, we're asking, what's wrong with you, right? What's wrong with you that we could support you with? But this flips that lens and says, actually, instead of looking at this disease and deficiency model, we're looking at what's right with you. How can you contribute to your community? How can you give back? And what's the relationship towards this sense of purpose and giving back to your own health in addressing your social needs? And then the third value I'll share is that it actually involves follow-up and evaluation. And more broadly on an organization level, if you do decide to implement some intervention addressing social needs or social prescribing, following through with what are your HR indicators doing? How are your team members feeling about this? What's your absenteeism rate and so forth, to actually show that not surprisingly, this is having an impact for your organization. So I'm going to shift into a few examples now before we close, and then we get to the question and answer. And I'll share one of my favorite examples of workplace social prescriptions, and that's at TELUS, not surprisingly. And this is called the TELUS Days of Giving. This happens every May. TELUS has a core value of we give where we live. And as part of this core value, the organization, we implement this massive, essentially a social prescribing program for all team members. And these are beautiful, self-designed social interventions on a broad organizational scale with something like 50,000 participants just this last year, over 350,000 acts of giving. And TELUS as an organization actually promotes and supports our team members in several ways in doing these acts of giving in our communities locally. So as a few examples, and you can see how these examples are very much social prescriptions and very much in line with the relationship-based, strengths-based approach that we shared earlier. You see that first one as using music as medicine. So this is Tom, a team member at TELUS. He uses the power of musical therapy to ease the pain of thousands of palliative care patients. He knows the universal language of music can bring joy for those who need it most. And by the way, as a workplace intervention and for Tom's health, this is fabulous. It brings a sense of purpose, of connectedness, of giving back. And you could see how this is such a positive thing, both for the health of the individual and then also for the health of the organization, having team members that have this sense of purpose like this. The second one there, Gail, another team member at TELUS. Gail dedicates hundreds of hours to keep the sea plastic free. She does her part to improve the environment because from coast to coast, it's everyone's responsibility. So these are examples of volunteerism. But in reality, even though they're people giving back, these activities are good for the individual's own health. Right? A lot of them are active. A lot of them have a sense of connectedness. A lot of them are good for mental health in particular as well, and have the sense of purpose that's fostered between people in the organization. So just some examples there that I've really appreciated in our work at TELUS and the TELUS Days of Giving. Another example of where social prescribing can be connected into the workplace is actually the TELUS Health Life Journey that I've seen as a new generation or the next generation of an EAP program that goes beyond the traditional kind of offering supports for deficiencies, right, that we spoke about earlier as that traditional medical model. And this program uses what you call care advocates. So when you reach out, you meet with a care advocate virtually, you end up connecting to the same person over and over again, so you develop a relationship. And it's similar to what other social prescribing programs, like in the United Kingdom and other parts in the world, have in terms of link workers. So these care advocates actually stay with employees through their journey. They assess their needs. They can connect them to healthcare, sure, but they can also offer several social prescriptions, such as financial advice, nutrition, legal advice, and more, depending on where they are in their community and what kind of resources their community and organization has set up for them. So it really has that social needs piece built in the assessment, recognizing, again, that 80% of health is social needs. It's not just your biology that determines your health and well-being. Another one I particularly love, especially as a family doctor working in different communities, is Canada 211, or the 211 service in your province. So this is a number that in every community in Canada, you can phone, and it essentially connects people. It can be anonymous, or you can identify yourself to community and social resources, housing, food. It's like the Good Food Box, by the way, as well, childcare, support for older adults and children. And that their mission is really to enable people to fully engage in their communities. And by the way, by doing that, they bring health to people. Again, considering that 80% of health is social needs. So this is one of my favorites because I've actually sat in an exam room as the family doctor for several families or several individuals who had social needs. We recognized that, and we actually called Canada 211 and co-designed something that made sense for them, whether it was a previous example, childcare, or something else that made a difference for their health. So here's the bottom line. In our organizations, we are stewards for our team members' health. And we need to be looking at health promotion in a way that's beyond just that medical part, of things, and beyond just the deficiency model and kind of the supports when people are sick model. We need to be looking at in a way that looks towards health promotion, social needs as well, and is sustainable and is rooted in community and is strengths based and actually helps people achieve health in that 80% of health that's from social needs, just like we said. But there's a huge challenge there in terms of how do you actually do this, right? So there are many different ways. Um, and many people think of individual level social interventions for the workplace, especially including myself being trained in the medical model. But there are different ways to slice this. And you could see here, this is something called the social ecological model. It essentially speaks to how many different layers there are of types of interventions that could contribute to a person's health and well-being. So you have the individual interventions, like for example, a one-on-one doctor's office visit or one-on-one talk therapy visit. The social demographic interventions, so things that are accounting for age, gender, race and racism, by the way, ethnicity, and so forth. So things like childcare, other culturally sensitive interventions at the workplace, especially considering all the things going on in the world right now, and our, I would say, our need to um, embrace, I think, and own our shared past as Canadian leaders and Canadian organizations in past and current injustices and oppression towards many communities living in Canada, including in anti-Black racism and more, and including in more examples like the unmarked burial of 215 Indigenous children, the residential school in Kamloops just a few weeks ago. That was shocking, but again, part of this legacy of racism and oppression and injustices that we need to own as Canadians and working our way forward towards a more just society. And then you have the interpersonal, again, like peer support workers or peer networks, that plays a big role in health promotion. Right? So having a peer recommend something or a trusted peer or someone at the workplace, for example, the COVID vaccine is a good way to protect yourself and your family, is actually very effective in terms of health promotion, but actually can be fabulous in terms of addressing social needs as well. The community and policy level as well. So this includes organizational policy, organizational programs like the TELUS Days of Giving. That's one example at that level. And then the societal or organizational policy layer there as well. So how the organization, for instance, supports people in taking leave more broadly as it's written in the documents and guides for team members. At the same time, we have a lot of puzzles to consider. So the remote and distributed workforce, and this uncertainty in terms of when people are coming back to those meaningful interactions in person, loss of natural boundaries between work as well. That's another challenge or puzzle that we'll have to work through, because now people, if you think of, people spend a third of their lives at work. Right now, many people are actually kind of spending their entire lives at work. They're living at work if they're working from home. And how do we grapple with that in terms of addressing social needs? The puzzle of health equity and social justice, and what our shared commitment should be in addressing social justice as we think about social needs. Again, thinking of the past and current histories of oppression and injustice that we have to own as Canadians. And then co-design as well. So always involving the people that you're serving and the programs that you're building out, so you can make sure that it actually serves them well, and it's built with the end user or the recipient in mind, both on an organizational level and then also on an individual level when you're thinking about social prescribing. So not just telling someone they need this and this, but actually exploring and having them land on an idea from, let's say, some options of things that their community has available to them. Oh, and that was a lot. So this is really a slide to share some of how this means reframing employee health promotion. So historically, it's been employee focused, fairly restrictive or deficiency focused, limited, really difficult to navigate as well. A standard solution, kind of an option A, B, C, and D if you're experiencing this. Whereas today we're thinking of more creative solutions and thinking about not just solutions, but culture change as well. That's employee and family, caregiver focused, flexible, unlimited, because we know that the return on investment is so strong, it actually pays to have investment early on and upstream rather than dealing with things downstream, more easily accessible and customizable as well. So the bottom line is this: people spend a third of their lives at work, often more. We have the duty here and an opportunity to build. How do we care for people and support them in being happy, healthy, and productive at the workplace? And again, build towards how we support people and purposefully working towards the organization's shared mission, whatever that is, by keeping them healthy, by keeping them engaged, by giving people opportunity for purpose, for co-design, and addressing their social needs, whatever they may be, right? Whether they may be in connectedness, in food security, in childcare, and these things that influence health, but are not classically thought of as healthcare. So I'd love to hear, in the spirit of learning and humility, and too, I don't have all the answers around this now. I'd love to hear some examples of really thoughtful social prescriptions or workplace interventions that you've seen address social needs at your workplace or other organizations in the chat. So please feel free to share, and we'll share them as they come up. And in the meantime, I'll hand it back to Jeffrey in moderating some of the Q&A for this in our shared dialogue. Thank you for sharing the time with us, and it's a pleasure to be here with the group.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Nowak. And now we are going to open things up to those of you listening in. So again, feel free to post any of your examples in the chat, and well as if you have any questions for our live Q&A, you can use the Q&A tab to submit those, and we'll answer as many questions that come in as we can in the time we have left. So first of all, how can you get leadership buy-in for programs like this, Dr. Nowak?
It's a key question because you can imagine that it's so hard to justify new investment, especially at a time when businesses are very tight over the last year and a half, especially with dealing with COVID and impacts of COVID on businesses. But the return on investment actually for health and social needs programs, especially mental health and things that impact mental health, like addressing social needs, is quite clear. And you can track this, and over, you have organizations who invest in mental health have positive return on investment on that money and greater success in organizations. And you have examples of this, like the Deloitte report on return of investment in workplace mental health programs, the Canadian and global best managed companies. They generally have really good workplace mental health programs, and I'd expand that to include social needs as well, because 80% of health is from social needs. Then your mental health programs also have to factor that in, and all of this comes from both the direct and the indirect costs of not investing there, right? So if you don't invest in workplace mental health and social needs, direct costs from healthcare, income support, like disability support, and so forth, and then also indirect costs, right? So absenteeism or presenteeism. So if someone's at the workplace but not functioning to the level that they could be, turnover, training people up is actually very expensive, and more. So all of those things make the return on investment quite compelling for people, and you could track that as you implement some of these programs at your workplace. And beyond that, right, the importance of good culture, healthy culture more broadly, shared purpose, and how much of the health of an organization relies on happy, healthy, productive people, and that investment in their people.
And also, I just noticed we did have someone submit an example. So while we're having other questions come in, Dr. Nowak, if you just want to discuss an example that's come in the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is from Deb from Health and Safety. The team has been think of support versus non-support, and the team has been providing advice and having it accepted. All of these things that they never thought was possible in terms of, I suppose, connecting to different resources. So I see, it sounds like the team there has this has been a puzzle, I think, for many organizations, especially in COVID. And very traditional health and safety teams now all of a sudden had this changing landscape of COVID, changing things that they were sharing advice on and connecting people to actually the social interventions as well, sometimes that were really relevant in COVID. And that's been such a puzzle for teams to work through, but also an opportunity to rethink how we do things beyond just COVID as well.
Okay, and so we have another question here. So how does one implement social prescription for a remote workplace, which is, I'm sure, something that is on many people's minds these days?
Yeah, I think of two ways to tackle this. So one is this decentralized approach, and the other one is the centralized approach. And in the decentralized approach, you can think of having approaches to social prescribing by kind of a multiple front door model where you have peers, leaders, maybe an online portal, some of these places where you share resources, opportunities to give back in your community, things like the Good Food Box, other types of supports, or to the really good question earlier, supports for COVID as well, including assistance for folks who are getting sick or having long-lasting impacts of COVID, or other mental health supports, all in a kind of a decentralized model throughout the organization. People are aware of it. They can kind of cross-refer depending on who they trust, who they talk to in the organization. And at the end of the day, people end up getting those resources from a variety of sources there. But then there's also the centralized approach, kind of like what we shared earlier in the life journey example. The life journey example is kind of like the link worker model in the United Kingdom, where you have people referring in to a designated link worker or care advocate, as is in this case, who does the assessment. They do a full conversation, and then they co-design a social prescription based on this person's needs, their strengths, and then they follow through with the person. And then in reality, you actually might want to have a mixture of both, where people know of the resources. There are many different access points from throughout the organization, but then you have kind of a place where folks can refer into that can have that more in-depth conversation and build out some of that plan, including health and social needs.
Right. Okay. And social prescription activities seem to take away from doing actual work. So, how is that question of balancing productivity versus social prescription activities? How is that managed?
Jeffrey, this is a bit of a paradox, isn't it? Because we think of, if you spend your time on, let's say, a social need or volunteerism, right? The TELUS Days of Giving is one example. Then you could see how that maybe takes time away from the rest of the things that you have to do. The answer here is one, many social prescriptions save you time elsewhere, right? Like the municipally subsidized childcare that takes away stress and saves time and allows time for other things. And then the example I shared allowed this person time for talk therapy and exercise and gardening during that time where they had a sense of safety and that their children were actually safe. They had some downtime for themselves. But then there's also this concept of think back to a time where you felt drained by work, right? Like things didn't really have a purpose. You were doing your job, but you didn't really feel fulfilled in it. And then compare that to a time where you felt energized by work, where you felt happy, healthy. You felt like you were contributing to broader good, making a difference. You had the sense of connection to your team members and your community. And interestingly, oftentimes it's not even about the whatever it is that the organization is selling that determines that. It's about the team. It's about those intangibles that come to that. So I think through how stark of a difference that is for a lot of people, and how much more people are willing to show up to work and be present and contribute to the organization's mission when they're happy, healthy, have that sense of connection, have their social needs met as well by the workplace, and have a workplace that's really investing in that part of their lives and seeing them as whole people.
Okay, and we do have another example coming in. We have, Deb has actually elaborated a little bit on her example, and then we have a new example submitted by Donna, perhaps Dr. Nowak, if you'd like to address.
Absolutely. Yeah, so Deb shared that what what the group here did for the team was started having mental health discussions and opening them up with each team member every week. First as individuals, and then as a broader team once they were more comfortable, had that shared safe space built and built to share without any fear of judgment or anything like that. And as a result, the group actually came back from injured to reacting after, it sounds like, after a very tough year, and working their way back to healthy. So this is a beautiful example of how the leadership, and actually probably collectively, if they're contributing to conversations as a team, supported each other in social needs and in mental health. And at the end of the day, it sounds like in that need for connectedness, despite the remote work, I'm assuming. So that's a beautiful example of a workplace intervention addressing social needs and a mental health need. And the other example there is from Donna as well. So the team there was very interested in crafting and potluck. Not everyone enjoyed it, but it was a start in the right direction. And they also had 10 flex days, which included reduced fees for community events like Stampede, concerts, zoo, science center, and reduced fees for products at local businesses. So again, a lovely way to emphasize at the workplace, you know what, we expect you to take time with your community. You shouldn't be taking all of your time with us. And I think that's a lovely way to do that. And then including maybe opportunities for volunteerism as well in that, because we do find that people giving back, that does foster also that shared sense of purpose and community if they contribute in a strengths-based way.
Okay, great. Well, I guess that's all the questions it looks like that we've had come in. So thank you to those who submitted questions, and thank you to those who in the chat submitted some examples for discussion. Before we go today, Dr. Nowak, would you like to any final comments for our audience and listeners?
Jeffrey, I think the bottom line is, as organizations, we have a responsibility to our team members, and I see a lot of organizations ready to make a change here. And all it takes is the critical mass of influencers to start saying that actually this is the right way forward. Actually, it's on us to be stewards for our team members' health, and that includes both their traditional health and medical needs, but also their social needs as they relate to health and as they relate to happy, healthy, and productive team members. So such an opportunity for people here to influence, and I appreciate you sharing the time with me.
Great. All right. Well, with that, we will wrap things up for today. Dr. Dominik Nowak, thank you for sharing your time and knowledge for today's webinar. And thank you to everyone out there who joined us today. Have a great rest of the day.